to say a very great welcome to all of you. We are quite a selected crowd today, but we're also going to record this session. So I think it can be shared to also the people who could not sign up for today. So a very great welcome for this CBC webinar number 5, which is a deep dive into how we can build confidence in circular solutions. My name is Mikkel A Thomassen, and I have the great joy of kind of moderating and this session today. And very briefly on the program, the agenda for today, I will do a short introduction to the Circular Buildings Coalition, and then we'll have 2 talks from Thung and Anne-Sophie Duret, then open up for questions and debate with you. And then we'll have a final presentation from Toge Sabro from Circu. And I think it would be appropriate just with a very short introduction from each of the speakers. So Ivan, just.
Hi, my name is Ivan, co-founder of Structure Collective, an advisory firm in the Netherlands on construction and circular economy in the built environment.
And hello, I'm Anne-Sophie Duret. I'm with the AXA Group Sustainability team in charge of AXA's environmental impact, meaning environmental impact across our various activities, insurance, investment, and own operations.
Toge?
Yes, hello, my name is Thung. I'm a partner in the software company Circu. We deliver a platform that allows you to estimate materials, embedded CO2, and likewise in existing building stock. And I will be presenting a bit about the Reclaim project, which we're happy was awarded a blueprint project space in the existing or in the current batch.
Yes, and thank you for all of you to be present today. And yeah, Mikkel Thomassen, and together with Victoria, we are from Smith Innovation, who is kind of supporting and doing a bit of structural backbone to the Circular Buildings Coalition. Just a very brief introduction to Circular Buildings Coalition, so CBC. It was a coalition or collaboration established almost 5 years ago with the aim of kind of setting targets, setting baseline, and also pointing to pathways to how to make construction more circular. And it was a partnership between the 6 organizations, all holding a very esteemed position, you might say, within the circular agenda, and kind of putting all these forces together in order to have a shared and trusted voice. And you can see the original 6 organizations between the partnership in the bottom of this slide. And one of them was also Metabolic, which is now partly, Ivan was working for Metabolic at that time, and that is also why it's quite logical that some of the analytical work has been carried over by you, Ivan. And then we in Smith Innovation is supporting the initiative by admin and coordination and so forth, communication. And I should also say that all this is possible because we have a financial support from the Louders Foundation. So we try to create a common language around circularity. We try to work very much, not so much on the technology push, but more on the demand pull side of circularity. And we also try very much to foster the kind of collaboration between companies and in the value chain that can be very difficult to do when you're a company or organization working on your own. So very much this cross collaboration aspects to the Circular Buildings Coalition, and all obviously with the aim of promoting and scaling, speeding the uptake of circular principles in the built environment. And we work in different ways. One is doing reports, and from the first part of the Circular Building Coalition, the 4th Pathways report was a very significant result. I think it kind of identified different ways by which circularity could point towards a less carbon-intensive future. But then we all have also been doing deep dive into specific challenges that we find actually key in order to promote circularity even more. And I think today is one of these very specific challenges. It is about assurance and part of that insurance, and it might seem very boring and also the number of people here today is perhaps reflecting that we are really we're digging deep now. But we try to address some of the perhaps less fancy issues, but the very fundamental issues for making circularity happen. And as for instance, as today, when we look at insurance solutions. And then thirdly, we have been supporting blueprint projects. And what you see here is the cohort of the first 5 blueprint projects supported. And luckily, we have now been in the position where the next round, and Circu being one of them, has been appointed and given financial support in order to demonstrate success and in order to kind of also perhaps demystify assumed barriers to circularity. So today's topic is about insurance, and Ivan will briefly talk about that. But I would like just to take 1 minute to put today's presentation into perspective. In the last round of blueprint projects applications, we received 88 applications, and we were very grateful and also a bit overwhelmed by all the interest. And for that reason, we also found it quite necessary that we tried to look at, across all of the applications and saying, what are the really testimony of? I mean, what do they, except for the very specific each of them work on, what kind of market elements are they addressing? And I think that you could sum it up as we tried on this slide, say that, and actually in order to promote circularity and make the market for circular solution work, there are different things that need to be in place. We need to have a valuation that circular solution is appreciated. And here we saw different proposals on material index, material passports, and so forth. We also need logistics and mapping of where resources are and where they could go as another element. Then we have the assurance component. We also need to know how to procure, how to make the contracts and so forth. For circularity, we have to test them and have to simulate them so we can calculate them in the different simulation programs. We also need the financial component to be in place. And then we perhaps also need a wider acceptance of why circularity is not just a bad version of virgin materials. And based on this, and this is very much work in progress, we have also been trying to think about if there was a kind of a sequence to this. I mean, I think a lot of us will know that there is a curve for technology uptake, but perhaps there is a similar curve actually for a market to mature. So in the beginning, it is about creating desirability. Then even for the most front-runner companies, you'll need test and simulation in order to see if things really work, and so on. And looking at assurance in this perspective, I would say that assurance is perhaps not the thing you need for the very first one to buy into circularity. But if we are to approach the bigger market, the late adopters, I think assurance, and as part of this insurance, in order to de-risk using circular solutions, is a very fundamental aspect. So I think today we are looking into something that is of utmost importance if we want to move beyond single pilots and into the mainstreaming of circular solutions. So it is, I believe, a very important thing we look at or talk on today. So that was just a bit of introduction and context. And on that note, I will leave the floor to you, Ivan, and move forward. Yeah, here we have the presenters. I think we have been talking about that previously. And if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A function, as you'll find in the top of the screen, and then we'll take them when we have time for discussion. And on that note, I will leave the floor to you, Ivan.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Mikkel. You can go to the next slide. I'll just say next, right? Okay, thank you so much. So I think most people that would be on the call today would agree that we should try to reuse construction products where we can. And I think that, in fact, we can see quite a large sort of untapped market for these materials. What you can see here is a little study that we did based on our modeling in the previous phase, which is how much materials could potentially be reused in a circular scenario up until 2050. and what would be the associated size of the market if that would actually happen. This is for all of Europe, and you can see in bricks we have somewhere between 10 and 11 billion. And you see for example, interior doors somewhere between 0 and sort of 2.6, 2.7 billion. And so there's quite a large potential market here, I would say. However, there are many obstacles for lots of people to actually do this, for this to be mainstreamed. And in the course of this research, we talked to a lot of material dealers. We talked to some people that are reusing projects right now, and some people that have perhaps considered it but have not done it. And what we've heard, and this is also something that comes, I think, out in some reports that you could see published online, is that the question of insurance is somehow a big question. And I think there's two parts of that. One of them is sort of actual risk, and one of them is perceived risk. And sort of a third thing there is that it's often the fact that it's sometimes difficult to answer is also often used as a reason, basically just not to use the project the secondary materials, even though it might have been used. Can you go to the next slide? So this is sort of the insurance problem. And what we'll see that it's actually, in a way, it's really a proxy for a much broader conversation about risk. And in this presentation, I'll explore why the existing insurance toolkit is difficult to apply in this context. And we'll look at some collaborative pathways that could help us to address these. Can you go to the next slide? And so for a very long time, the construction and insurance industries have really developed and evolved a system for managing the risks of building with new standardized and predictable materials. Of course, reclaimed materials are really not that predictable. And this mismatch leads really to a gap in coverage. And I would say it's a bit of a break at the moment on the entire circular economy. And so when stakeholders in a construction project say that they have an insurance problem with using secondary materials, what we think is what they're really talking about is a collection of underlying risks that they don't know how to manage, or they don't have a responsible person for. And so it's really four main types of risks. The first one is performance and failure. So simply, how do we know this steel beam will perform as expected for the next 50 years? Who is liable if it does not? If, for example, a reclaimed brick leads to water damage, is that the fault of the brick or the person who installed it? If some installation leads to mold, is this installation fault, or should it be solved further up in the chain? With new materials, the warranty situation is quite clear. With the used one, it's a little bit of a gray area, unless, of course, you do lots of bespoke testing. Second would be project risks. So this is really about sourcing the right quantity and quality of reclaimed materials, which can be unpredictable. What happens if the construction of a donor building is delayed, for example, or the materials that are recovered are not up to spec? This can cause project delays and cost overruns, and who pays for that risk? The third one would be damage and liability. So a component that seemed good before might be damaged on removal, on transport, or reinstallation, and who's liable if an item is damaged in transit, etc. And the fourth one is supply chain reliability and the risks that are sort of associated with that. Can a project manager really specify 500 identical doors, and will they be available on time? And they're not trivial concerns. They're real concerns, and they're felt at different places in the value chain, from the asset owners at Pioneer, who might be willing to absorb some of the extra costs and extra risks. But there are also larger construction management firms or other types of stakeholders that really demand a risk parity between new and reused materials before they would consider going ahead of using secondary materials. And if they cannot get this risk parity, then they might, decide to choose simply a new material. Next slide. So now the construction industry, of course, already has a sophisticated set of insurance products designed to cover these types of risks. But when we try to apply this toolkit to secondary materials, you see some friction appears. For example, if we look at property insurance, which covers the building itself, I mean, there's different types of problems, but one of them can be a valuation problem. What is the replacement value of a unique 100-year-old staircase? Or how do we know that the proof that the reclaimed material is just as safe and reliable as a new one? And getting that proof, you will probably need some bespoke third-party testing, which of course is always possible, but it can also wipe out some of the financial benefit of using the material in the first place. Then another common product are the construction all risk and the professional liability insurance. These policies cover the construction processes and the work of architects and engineers. Here, a problem is ambiguity. If a facade built with reclaimed panels fails, was it an inherent defect in the panel or an error in the installation method? And if you're looking at professional liability insurance, of course, the question can also arise if the staff that are supposed to install the panels have to been trained appropriately to actually use these kind of secondary materials with the different types of tolerances that are required of it. And then another one that covers really the time risk is, for example, delay in startup insurance. So the potential of sourcing and testing delays makes it really quite more difficult to really insure for project delays. And I would say it's still relatively unexplored because there are not that many really large scale projects that use these kind of materials. So how to actually assess the risk of startup is still quite difficult. And so because of this, because the formal insurance toolkit is not really well suited at the moment, what we see that the industry basically developed a series of workarounds. Can you go to the next slide? And so what we have noticed were, I would say, 4 main workarounds that in their own ways address these risks that we just talked about. And they all have their upsides, but also their downsides. And so some engineers really practice what I would call design conservatism. So that means they simply assume a lower or higher performance than they would usually do. And so they would over-engineer basically the products or design around it. That can work, of course, but it's in terms of material efficiency, it's not the best. You would prefer to have the right size of beam for the right task. Another thing that we see a lot is basically the cascading of uses. So you, instead of using a window actually as a window, you might use it as an interior separating element. This reduces the risk, can be pretty, but it also, in a way, it is a form of downcycling, of course, because you don't use the inherent property of the materials to the full effect that you could. Then other workarounds that we've seen used quite successfully is basically different types of business models that really take a stronger control over the whole supply chain. So instead of dealing with the uncertainty that may occur when you source, transport, install a product, they'll take up this whole chain such that they are aware of all the uncertainties in the different steps of the process. We've also seen that it is often these type of companies that have a bigger chance to work together with an insurance company because they basically have more data on every step of the process. So there's more assurance there. And then finally, another way to reduce. And so I think that's quite a good model. The only problem is that it demands quite a lot of the types of companies that you need to be for this to make this possible. So it's not necessarily super scalable. You preferably, if you design markets, you don't want only companies that control the whole supply chain. You might also want companies that are basically just resellers and don't also source or also install the materials. Finally, fourth one is different contractual models. We've seen also those So for example, if you have a contractual model where you not only design, build, but also maintain and operate, then the building owner might be a little bit assured that in case of failure, well, this company actually has to take care of it. And in this case, you don't really address the underlying risk, but you basically shift it from the building owner to the one holding the contract. Okay, next slide. And so these are quite, I mean, I think they are quite useful ways to address the risk, but our question that we have is how can we mainstream and how can we really unlock the value of these kind of the whole stream of secondary materials? And we think that we've seen at least is that these ways of addressing risk are not sufficient, and as a result, the market has not scaled accordingly. And we really sort of see three main ways to address that. And I think Anne-Sophie will also get her perspective on some of these points. And so the first one is simply clarifying policies. So insurers really need to clarify how their existing policies might apply. They could provide guidance and endorsements that reduce some of the ambiguity for stakeholders. Second, and this is probably the most important one, it's really helpful if the insurance industry helps to champion and support standardization. Of course, this needs to be always in collaboration with the organizations that would actually offer these kind of product groups. And so the core of the problem there is a lack of reliable data and trusted processes. And a way that it is possible, and this is something that we've seen elsewhere, is instead of trying to certify every individual brick or beam, the industry can, for example, certify different processes of deconstruction and reconstruction and handling. We saw there are some cases of an initiative in Belgium called the Safety and Circularity Attestation, which is a third-party verification in which a company's process recovering materials is being verified. And this may give an insurance company the confidence that they can actually underwrite the final product without having to inspect every single item. And the third one is to basically innovate in new ways of underwriting these materials. And so one problem that that exists at this moment, I think, with the insurance of, let's say, for example, the reuse of bricks, is that there are still not a lot of sort of long-term data on the performance of these secondary bricks when they're newly installed in facades. And of course, there are some companies that have installed these kind of things, but these data are not always well shared. And so really sort of sharing the data on the performance of secondary products, I think is quite helpful to improve some underwriting models. Yeah, next slide. Right. Okay, this is an example of the second point I just made. So there's quite a lot of different ways for secondary products to return to the market. So for example, you might have a reclamation dealer that manages the complete supply chain. You might have just project-to-project reclamation. There's other ways like take-back schemes, and you have models in which the reclamation dealer is the reseller only. All of them deal with sort of the similar steps. So dismantling, transport, reconditioning, grading and sorting, and storage. But what difference between these models is the scope of responsibility over these different steps. And so once this scope of responsibility gets cut up in little pieces, there are information gaps starts existing. And so what we just talked about in the previous slide, which was about setting some standards of basically the transfer of the quality between these steps. So if you are able to certify that the process from dismantling is correct, then the data gap there is sort of solved. And then once you have a complete set of the data on the whole chain, I think you you should have some assurance, or at least you have some assurance on the quality of the product that should come out of that. That's it for now for me. Sorry, it's perhaps quite technical. I didn't go into this one because I think it's not relevant at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Ivan. And I couldn't help thinking when you talked about these mitigation measures. I mean, I guess the most obvious one is simply not to use circular products at all. I know it hasn't been quite of your inquiry, but do we have any indication about how much more circularity we would have if assurance products were around? I know it's a big question to ask, but for instance, we know from bricks that here we do have insurance products. I mean, what have been the market effect of having that insurance solution for reused bricks?
Well, I find it hard to say something general about the market, but as you just said, there is indeed a company, Conclure, that was able to offer a product liability insurance on their bricks, meaning that in the case that their brick fails, the insurer, that would be in that case VHV insurers, would basically pay out any claim for the consequential damages of that failure. And what they have seen is that this opens at least a new, the market to a new type of stakeholder. And those types of stakeholders would basically cover larger projects where if something like this is uncertain, basically it's off the table. It's like we won't even consider using secondary bricks if in some kind of way we're not able to transfer the risk of failure to some kind of insurance company. And so I do think it opens the way to basically new types of stakeholder that would consider using these materials. I think at the moment you see mostly it's pioneering, people that are interested in assuming some of the risks themselves as part of either a branding effort or some kind of demonstration effort, right? But really, if we're talking about mainstreaming, then you would have to look at a whole different type of developer to be able to also take up these materials.
Okay, thank you. And on that, Anne Duret, I think I will,
Thank you.
To you.
Thank you, Ivan. And maybe before diving deeper into the reclaimed material insurance topic, I would like to take a step back and give you a bit of context related to AXA's strategy. So next slide, please. Nope, the one before.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So in our current strategic plan, Unlock the Future, we have 3 pillars, of which one dedicated to sustainability, which is called Expanding AXA's Role in Society. And in this pillar, we have 2 global commitments. The first one around inclusivity and the second one around climate. And on climate more specifically, we continue our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So basically emissions that are related to our insured portfolio, our investment portfolio, but also emissions related to what we call own operation. But in this strategic plan, we really want to insist on where we have the most added value as an insurer. And so first, we want to focus on supporting our clients to be better adapted, be better prepared to the consequences of climate change, because we are already facing the consequences. And this is really a core to our activity as an insurer who ultimately pays the claims in case of a climate-related event. And the better our clients are prepared, the better they are adapted, then the lower the claims, and also the easiest the recovery. So first focus on adaptation. And the second focus is on supporting the transition towards low carbon and more resource efficient business models. And we know that sometimes those practices come with new risks that we as an insurer need to better understand to be able to address those risks. Because otherwise, without this insurance safety net, the sustainable practices won't be able to scale and to become mainstream. And this brings me to today's discussion. Next slide, please. Because this is precisely in line with this commitment that we have around ensuring the transition, that we have been working on the insurability topic around reclaimed material in the built environment. So to start, we have set up an internal working group gathering underwriters, risk experts, but also claims handlers from our construction and property lines of business, and from various entities across the globe. The objective was first to get a better understanding of the practices and of the associated risks. So we started last year with what I call an internal check-in. We shared a survey with our entities to collect insights around their local regulation, because we know that it's very specific from one country to the other. Also, to get insight on the maturity of our entities in their market and their positioning versus their peers, if any. And then, beginning of this year, we worked with Arup to develop two pieces of work. So first, what we call a white paper. It's an internal document, but which was intended to raise awareness among our construction and property underwriters on the use of reclaimed materials. It's really to raise awareness. And then a second document, which is more concrete, and which is what we call a checklist for on-site visits of our risk experts, for them to gain insights into the risks that may arise from reclaimed material on a specific project. So in both documents, we looked at different types of elements, high-risk elements like steel beams or fire-resistant doors, but also medium-risk elements like bricks, windows, or heating, ventilation, air conditioning. And for each of those elements, we assess the risk that could occur during the different stages of the reclamation process. So, for example, risks that are related to difficulty during the disassembly of the product. Those two documents have been shared with the team a couple of months ago, and we now plan to have follow-up with the entities in 1 year time to get the insights from the field. The idea is also to start collecting data on potential claims involving reclaimed materials and build this history that you mentioned earlier, Ivan. Next slide, please. So after having done the work to better understand the risk, we should acknowledge the fact that some entities are already ahead. And here, it's the case of AXA France. Back in 2023, they have updated the terms and conditions of their bâtissure product to include reclaimed material under certain conditions. So a few words on bâtissure. So it's a product which covers damages both during the construction phase and after the delivery of the project. During the construction phase is a construction all risks, or tout risque chantier, which covers damages caused to the work, as well as damages caused to third parties by the work. So, for example, it could be damage to the work. It's basically due to collapse or caused by external events like a landslide or storm. And damages caused to third parties. Here it's, for example, a failing till which damage a neighbor vehicle. And now, after the delivery of the project, it's about a décennal liability project, or dommage ouvrage, which covers this time the cost of repairing intrinsic defects in the building and for a period of 10 years. But this is very specific to France, where it's linked to a regulation that imposes this coverage for 10 years. So in bâtissure, damages due to the use of reclaimed material are covered if they are certified by third-party technical consulting firms, as you mentioned earlier, Ivan. And it's notably the case for structural elements, electric components, and safety systems. It means that the contractors should make the reclaimed material they are using certified, externally certified, to be covered. But next slide.
Yeah, sorry. There we go. Yeah.
Oh, I'm back.
Yeah, you're back.
Do you hear me? Yeah, thank you.
Well, yeah, we didn't hear the last 20 seconds, so you might start from the beginning of the slide.
Okay, so what I was saying at the end of the previous slide is that in order to be covered, the reclaimed material needed to be certified externally by third-party technical consulting firms. And so it's up to the contractors to make sure that the reclaimed or the secondary materials are externally certified. But now moving forward, actually to avoid relying on those case-by-case analyses, which are lengthy and costly, it's essential to establish clear norms or standards to give insurers a sufficient level of comfort to insure without having to test every single material. So it means that the professional sectors should develop what we call professional recommendation for reuse or equivalent, depending on the market. In France, actually, professional recommendations correspond to technical documents which are prepared by building professionals to determine the methods for carrying out the work. And they serve as a reference to third-party technical consulting firms, but also to insurers. And in the event of a dispute, it could also serve experts. And when those professional recommendations are deemed compliant with the insurance concept of what we call common technique in insurance by a specific commission called the C2P commission, it means that the insurance is almost automatic. It's like a stamp that gives insurer the sufficient level of comfort to kind of automatically insure the project without needing a case-by-case testing. And if professional recommendations are common practice for brand new materials, it's not the case for secondary materials. So far, the only guide of professional recommendation for reuse we have is the one developed by the CTICM, which is an organization that supports professionals in steel construction. But as we said earlier, to make the use of reclaimed material mainstream, it's up to other professional sectors to develop similar practices that will eventually give sufficient level of comfort to the insurers. And that's it for me.
But thank you so much, Anne-Sophie. And I think I'll stop sharing now and we'll move into the debate and question. Two questions on for clarification on my side. One thing is, are you moving beyond France at any point? And secondly, are you the only one doing this, or do you also have other colleagues within the insurance business starting to do the same thing as you're doing?
I can start with the second question. Ivan mentioned that Concular is working with VHV on the German market. But I think it's more related to product liability insurance. Here, the example I gave is more for construction and liability, but for the overall building and for a period of 10 years. There are also everything related to the professional liability. And when it comes to specific material, we see platforms like Concular also in France, insured by some companies. I would say it's, I think, still a topic which is early stage. and insurers are, I think, only starting to work on the topic. And when it comes to AXA, as I said, we set up a working group gathering entities across the globe, actually to raise awareness and see how we could develop other initiatives in other markets.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anne-Sophie. And I think for the next 15 minutes, we have a place for open question debate. And but Ivan, you have also been preparing a bit of following up questions, I believe. Perhaps you should start up there, and please do not hesitate with asking in the Q&A and chat if there's any question from the audience. Yeah, but Ivan.
Maybe if there's a question from the audience first.
It doesn't seem so. Really, but otherwise I do have one question, but I wouldn't override the ones you're having, Ivan.
So what is the relation between, let's say, the insurance company and, let's say, this steel group that is able to give, like what do you expect from that documentation in order to give confidence for an insurance company? Let's say, what kind of level of, what are we looking at, the types of documentation and guidelines?
It's really about giving detail on the method for carrying out the work. It goes from, and for secondary material, it's really, it's about how we dispose the material, what about the transport, how about the storage, and then the reinstallation, and also giving confidence on the way, really how the work is done, and not necessarily focusing on testing every piece, as you mentioned earlier. And then it's very specific to each type of products. And so far we only have those guidelines for the steel construction, but we would need similar guidelines for other type of materials. So for example, I don't know, electric installation and so on. And I mentioned a commission that certified that the professional recommendation are compliant with what we call common practice. And there are insurers attending the commission, and so that's why they are able to certify the fact that those professional recommendations are clear enough and that they are detailed enough to give the level of comfort.
So in a way, it's almost an invitation to the various marketplaces that are trying to resell the things, come together and create some protocols for the different materials to,
But knowing that those marketplaces are working with different type of products, so then we still need to have professional recommendations specific to the material we are looking for, because they are, depending on the material, the level of risk is not the same. The potential risk won't occur at the same place during the process. So it should really be specific, but it could be an effort coordinated by those platforms. Yes, indeed. And this is, sorry, and in France, sorry, this is, those professional recommendations are mainstream for virgin materials. So it's the standard process is to rely on those professional recommendations. Yeah. It's just that for reclaimed material, they do not exist. Only one.
Yeah.
And just to follow up on your question, Ivan, I think it's perhaps worthwhile to reflect a bit upon why do we have this solution? Then we have it for steel, and we also have it for bricks. Is that simply because they happen to be first, or we have a very single strong player doing that, or are there any inherent properties of that market or these materials that makes it easier? Yeah, can we learn anything from?
Well, I think
bricks and steel.
For bricks, it's a little bit easy because it's, I wouldn't say it's exactly a commodity, but let's say you could look at them in sort of big batches. That's one thing, and it's quite, like, the opportunity is quite clear, and sort of the type of insurance that you put want on it is also quite clear, and the risk is, I would say, relatively easy to transfer, in the sense that if you're satisfied that the brick has certain properties, and in the case of Concler, they had some history of installed secondary bricks, so there was already some claims history there, which is basically there were no claims. So that made it also a little bit easier, I think, for the insurance company to say like, okay, well, maybe this is not too bad. And the fact that in the case of Concler, they actually controlled the whole chain. So they controlled how they source it, they controlled how they transport it, and they controlled how they install it. And so there are, many uncertainties out of the process. So that makes it just much easier to then assume the risk. I don't know exactly how the inside of an insurance company works, but this is what I've been told.
Yeah, and any thoughts on your side by these two materials? And is that simply coincidence, or are they easier to work with because they're easier to look through?
No, I think we need to start somewhere, and apparently they were more in the forefront, but maybe also because it's probably easier, as Ivan said, for those type of materials.
And perhaps please do ask if you have any questions in the chat. But perhaps coming a bit back to your presentation, Ivan, because as you were saying in the beginning, I mean, one thing is an insurance product, but there might also be other ways of creating assurance and de-risking circular solutions. It might also be with a business model where you, for instance, have building as a service, so where the provider is also taking the risk of the building not performing the right way. How do you see the landscape in the future? Will we see business model innovation to assurance in some product areas and insurance products for other products area? What will the bigger landscape of not only insurance but also assurance look like?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, usually if you have different contractual models, these are usually for the larger projects, right? So organizations that are working in teams that are able to also perform the maintenance operations and have the business set up to do that. So I don't see that necessarily relevant for all products. So I don't necessarily see distinction in product types, but perhaps in project size of the types of de-risking interventions that might be considered. Because if the project is really quite large, then also sort of the third-party certification is not that, is not that expensive, let's say, as part of the total project cost. If it's really about, let's say, building a few houses here and there, you're not going to do third-party certifications, just not feasible. So I think project size is a better way to look at the types of de-risking that might be considered.
Yeah, and so for you, how do you see the landscape? Will you only insure certain parts of it? I mean, what kind of circular solution should we not expect insurance products for? Would be another way of asking.
I don't know if we can say that there are projects that won't be insurable if they include secondary material. I think it's really, for sure, depending on the intrinsic level of risk. Are we talking about structural elements, or are we talking about just internal stuff? Ivan, you had a slide on the skin and the internal piece. For sure, for internal piece, it's the risks are way smaller, so no specification on this. When it comes to structural elements, for sure, the level of scrutiny would be higher, and for sure, we will probably rely on third-party certification. But I would say it's already the case for brand new products, brand new materials. The fact of relying to those third-party certificates here is not specific to secondary material. It's already the common practice for virgin materials. But I think it's notably the case when we are talking about structural elements. For other items that are only decorative, let's say, no issue and probably no need for third-party certification. And for the other, in the medium risk, we will at least need the professional recommendation if we don't want to follow the individual testing each time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So there is obviously how critical it is if something breaks obviously plays a role.
And you know, I sometimes do the parallel because I'm also involved in other topics around circularity, but in the motor industry, because as an insurer, we also insure cars and we manage the claims. And when we manage motor claims, we promote the use of secondary motor parts. But it's a common practice, except from security parts. Of course, when it comes to security parts, we don't take the risk. But for the rest, it's a more and more common practice to rely on pieces from the circular economy, parts from the circular economy.
That's very interesting, and also something I think Toke will talk about in a minute, to the like-for-like situation. We have a question on if any of you have experienced or are aware of insurance option for insulation materials, and specifically regarding the technical material characteristics that apply in this case. So anyway, any solutions on the reuse of insulation?
I've seen the question come up before and I don't have an answer. And I know actually it might be an interesting area to create initiatives around. I've had this question also from SME Europe, let's say, like who's responsible for the mold and insulation if it's coming from secondary products, because it might be poorly installed or the moisture content might have been too high from the onset. So I think it might be an actual barrier still at this point, unless someone else has seen already some examples. Yeah.
And I guess it also depends on the type of insulation material. Is it nature-based? I know that we are looking at this topic as well. And here we may have a high risk of fire. And this is the main risk for which we have concern. So yeah, it really depends on the nature of the insulation material.
I think in this case it was not nature-based, but more conventional insulation product. Yeah, so not technical insulation,
waste,
but
maybe.
Yeah, but I think more stone wool, glass wool products reused. I think it's more or less time to thank you for your thoughts. I think it's kind of time for doing the final piece of presentation today, because as you said, Ivan, in the previous round we had Concula looking into insurance solutions, and in this round we have Circu also addressing the market for circularity. So let me try sharing once again, and let me just share the screen here, and I think I should. You see the wrong one, I guess. And I need to just a minute. Okay, so hopefully you see my screen now. And Toke, I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you. So thank you, Mikkel and CBC, for giving me 5 minutes to talk a bit about the current blueprint project called Reclaim. So as said, my name is Toke Sabo. I come from the Danish company Circu, and we run this Reclaim project together with another company called Rethink Strategy that comes more out of a digital business development role within the insurance industry. We are not related to the insurance industry. We know something about data and circularity and so on. So Reclaim's focus is on collaborating with the insurance industry, on examining the role the insurance industry can play in really driving a market for secondary materials through the management of building damage claims. And as we heard, also in Denmark, for vehicle damages, there are a lot of reuse going on, as pilots for how to work with secondary, you can say, materials, but not really within the building industry. And that, even though that if we look across Europe, building damages are a multi-billion-dollar thing. In Denmark, we are way above 500 million euros per year alone in building damages related to storm, to water, and so on. But today, because of new for old policies and legislation, the default in handling these claims is to use new materials for repair. So we are not focusing on the insurance of the materials themselves, but we're trying to address, together with the insurance industry, the underlying claims models, the underlying business models that in the end drive the material procurement decisions. So if we can change some of these models, can we then unlock the procurement power that is within the insurance industry, the insurance sector, and in managing these claims, and thus redirect substantial material flows towards circularity. So shift slide, please. So just very briefly around Circu, just to sort of say where we are coming from. We are very much a data-driven company. We created a platform that allows you to create a digital twin in under 6 seconds for an existing building based on parametric data and calculations using open data and typology studies. But that means that we come from the data perspective. We are very, very interested in being able to tell things around the existing building, what materials are in it, what components are in it, what potentials are in it, and then try to work with industries to, you can say, unlock business models through those data. And in this context, the insurance industry, how, if we deliver data on the existing buildings, can that, in collaboration with the insurance industry and other parties, help unlock new ways of looking at your policies and at your claims model. So if you shift the slide, Mikkel.
Yeah.
So the core in this is, as you also kind of did a cliffhanger around, is that we will look at if it's possible to transform the new for all paradigm, insurance policy paradigm, to a like-for-like approach. So looking much more at substituting a given window or a given door with a circular product, a used window, a used door. And we'll do that within the Reclaim project and within the runway we have available in these blueprints projects. We'll do it in 3 steps. First of all, again, all this is together with the insurance industry in Denmark and Nordic countries. We'll try to document very specifically in the existing policy frameworks, in the existing claim models, what are the barrier and opportunities towards working with a like-for-like approach. And I'll come back to some of the barriers we are seeing there, but really understanding what is the scope of change here, what can we do. We'll then actually work to see whether we can design, you can say, a initial version of a like-for-like model based on actually going through specific claims, actually doing a bottom-up where we examine very specific claims on buildings and examine how could they look based on a like-for-like model. And we will try, based on that, to extrapolate learnings, insights on what could be best steps industry could take in order to themselves examine approaches to work with like-for-like in building claims as a future business model. If you shift, Mikkel. Of course, there are numerous challenges and barriers in doing that. In Denmark, it's down to national legislation. We have an Insurance Contracts Act that provides barriers. We have the regulation around how to assess damage extent and compensation. We miss index prices on secondary materials in order to be able to assess the extent of damage. the availability, compliance of building codes, and not least customer preferences and attitudes, which will be a huge part, of course, in this. How will the consumer accept these new types of policies? But what we can say, even though we know, and even though Danish and Nordic insurance companies recognize these challenges are here, that there's a great interest, and we are working with them to really find those points where we can tweak the model, start tweaking the models to start experimenting with it without having to wait for all these barriers to overcome, because that's a much bigger systemic issue. So we're working both with insurance providers, and we're working with professional service companies that are claims management experts and are really experts in assessing building damages. Last slide, Mikkel. So just contact information for this project and Circu, and if anyone there are interested in ways in really unlocking this like-for-like potential, we are very interested in having a further conversation, and our contact information is there. That was a quick fire version of the Reclaim project.
Thank you so much, Toke. And this is just to kind of finish this session by just having this information on CPC, and also just to say thank you for joining today. But I can't help asking you, Anne-Sophie. So this is a bit of a different approach because it's still on a project level. But do you see this as a way forward also for insurance companies to use the solution suggested by Toke here?
Yeah, we are today really focusing our effort on using, let's say, a reclaimed material or secondary material when it comes to motor claims, but we also want to work on integrating more secondary material when it comes to property claims management. After a fire or after a flood, to which extent could we use more secondary material to restore?
Okay, so something to build on here, I guess.
Yeah.
But thank you all for joining, Toke for presenting the final solution, Ivan for presenting the results of your deep dive, Anna for showing how insurance companies can actually take the lead in making circularity happen. And thank you all for the audience to join. We look forward to have our next deep dive. We'll look into just transition aspects and where the date on that deep dive will be announced shortly. So thank you all for joining, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us if any additional information is needed. So thanks for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So thanks, Ivan.